Right. So for today's uh, session, we're going to maybe do a little bit of takeaways from our homework reading, discuss motivating students, and maybe go into our problem of practice. If we wind up with very small people, maybe we'll all just talk about it together for problems of practice. So once again, this is our timeline. We're on the January, February motivating students section of that. And so this time we'll be talking about motivating students, and next time we'll talk about how things go when we try some new things around motivating students. Oops, I'm talking through your slides, Christy. I'll let you talk on this one. Oh, you're muted, Christy.
Okay, there we go. We have so today we're going to be looking at a little bit of feedback from session 4, not a bunch, but we're going to debrief some homework and then look at just what are some issues that we're struggling with in our classrooms around motivating students. Just kind of sharing experiences, and then talk about just motivation in general, types of motivation, what ways to increase motivation with our students, things like that. And remember, this is day 1 of a 2-day series about motivation. So we'll also be interested in hearing some feedback from you about what are you looking for in day 2? What do you want to see that wasn't covered today? How can we kind of customize it more towards what you're looking for? So that's kind of our plan for today. Same norms as always. And I will say we are amazing at these norms, we meaning you guys, and just the respectful conversations that are had and just the sharing and learning from each other. I really appreciate that about this group. So thank you as always for committing to that.
All right. So the homework that we gave last time was an article from the New York Times about student motivation. And the big things from that were that students say that teachers who love learning, just going to escape out of this because that's a big wall of text and it's a lot easier to read if we kind of go through it. I hate to change things on the fly, but I meant for this to, I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, so students say it motivates them when teachers love learning. And one of the things that we've had a conversation within our school with our climate team is how do you show your students that you enjoy the subjects that you're teaching? So you can either put something in the chat or unmute and talk. Like, how do you let them know that you like it? What are some ways that you guys work on that?
I tell my kids all the time how much I love my job, that I love working with students, and I love the subject that I teach. I just come out and flat out and tell them, I'm like, I got the best job ever. I might sound really kind of corny, but I've taught a lot of things like different types of science and physics because it's hands-on and that's what I like to do. And I'm in a good mood and they can see that I like they can see that I like what I do. I hope.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on how you show students that you like things?
Something that I do is like, I tell them like when I'm attending meetings or like if I'm not there for something or can't help them after school, I say like, oh, I'm attending a class, like help me be a better teacher, like showing them that even as a teacher, like I'm still like learning, I guess, like telling them exactly how I'm doing that by taking classes.
That's cool. That's cool. One of the ways that I show students that I like a subject that I've been told, oh, you must like this, is when I'm like, oh, let me show you this really cool thing. Like, oh, have you noticed that this happens? right? If I do this, then I go like, oh, we get to go make this really awesome. We get to make candy this week, right? Or whatever it is that I like to do, like, oh, and then later this week, we're gonna make popcorn and it's gonna show how like kinetic manipulative theory works. And when I get really excited about something that we're gonna do and how goofy it is, my students like, I don't know, they think it's really nerdy, but they can tell that I like it, and that's how I do it. Any other thoughts on how we show people?
No, sometimes I'm doing my first profession is I was a physician, and right now I'm teaching biology, and I make a connection between if how you can use it actually for your profession later. So like this, and so if you will know everything about biology, you will use it, and might be something.
No, I
Very
think
cool.
you're right. Connecting it to something that kind of grounds them or connects to the real world, I think is key. I was just chatting with my son the other night, and we were talking about his biology class, and he was saying, well, there's a lot of talking. The teacher talks a lot. And then he said, but she's really into it. And that's kind of cool. Like, yes. When your children say things
nice.
and you're like, oh, that's a win. All right. I can't show that that's a win. I got to be cool, but that's a win. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So that leads us back into personal interest, like exactly what some of you guys were saying. Like, you just talked about how do we connect it to life, and there are other passions, like when I'm connecting chemistry to food, or when I'm connecting physics to people who like to make cars. And I heard you guys talk about connecting it to biology and the things that we do. So connecting it to their passion and connecting it to our passion, that gets us there. The hands-on interactive activities, like science is made for hands-on interactive activities. The one thing that we can add to that is looking about how we can learn from the mistakes that we make in those hands-on activities. So when you think about in your classroom and your students, when they put something together and it doesn't work, how do you reward and help students learn from those mistakes so that they don't be like, oh, I just got that wrong? What are some ways you do that?
One of the things that I try to do is I try to get all of them to like answer a question. And I tell them like you're not graded on whether this is right or wrong, and kind of take the like pressure of being right or wrong out of it. And then I have them essentially like rotate their answers around the room. So it's like randomized. And so they don't feel bad about making a mistake because they know that it's not like like it's not necessarily going to be tied, like everyone's not going to know it's their mistake. And it kind of allows them to learn from it.
I love that example, especially when you go through and you're saying, tell me something you heard from someone else at your table, so that that's totally not my mistake because I didn't even say it, whether it was said by you or someone else, so that takes it away from them. Go ahead. Elena, you were going to say something and I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, so I did. Okay, let me. I'm kind of lost a little bit. Let me see how can mistake I found it.
You could give maybe like participation points just because they're trying.
Yeah. Interactive activities.
I had a group of students today that collected data, and the method in which they collected it was incorrect. And, for me, I was asking them questions like how they did it and can you demonstrate? And then I showed them how to do it. But this is after I did a demo and all the appropriate things. And it wasn't, and they took it on stride. Like, they didn't blame, they weren't upset. We just redid it. I was there to supervise. And in 5 minutes, we had data that looked wonderful. And so, I kind of hope that they internalize it. Like, you can make a mistake, but it can be rectified. I mean, nothing's ever really written in stone, with a lab. You can always, redo it if the data is not correct. I don't know. They didn't seem bummed
Yeah, and
out.
that's really common in science, is you took data and it wasn't correct and you got to fix it. So that's actually pretty much like what science is like.
Also, I think very interesting labs. We made a yogurt, for example, and they are choosing their recipes and made their honor yogurts, and everybody tasted it. And the next day, it was kind of cool. Explaining and actually calculated how much cost their yogurt, and so they decided maybe it's cheap to make it at home.
Nice.
So this experience.
That was fun. When I went through the training and I did the yogurt experiment, the first thing I did was go home and make yogurt for like 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I love when we're doing the candy engineering and they make a candy that's terrible. They got to go and make everyone else taste their terrible candy and then talk about what they did to make their terrible candy and then how do we do it better next time. It's just so fun to make other people taste awful things. I don't.
I also have made a couple things. One, like, communicate right away from the get-go. I expect mistakes. Like, that's how we learn, and we all benefit when we make mistakes, right? That's a good thing. And then also, not really like making a big deal out of it, but like when someone says something or explains something incorrectly, I sometimes I say like, oh, I'm so glad you said that. And then I go on to talk about like, that's a really common way of seeing it. And, it's actually this way or whatever. And just as a, yes, it's wrong, but I'm so glad that you brought that up because that happens to a lot of people and we can just kind of correct that right now. And so it's like a good thing that they said a wrong thing, if that makes sense. So I don't know. That's one thing I've tried.
They also say that helping out is to get a feeling of accomplishment. So that's one of the things that I found today when we were doing the little mini quizzes so people get like, I can do one skill at a time. Like, oh, I figured out this one skill. I figured out this one skill. I figured out this one skill. Let me try all of the skills. Maybe I can actually do better than that now that I know that I have these 4 skills under my belt. So they didn't necessarily have an A, but they're like, I've got the pieces, I can put them all together. And then the last thing that came up out of that article is preparing for the future. So using the class to prepare for their future. And I know that some people brought up things like connecting biology to your life and how you might use that moving forward and how we continue to learn ourselves to move forward. So those are all things that came out from what students say motivate them. One of the ways that they talk about it often in different workshops I've been through is talking about when have you been motivated? So I know that lots of people picked up a new hobby during COVID or when we were all stuck inside our house, or they picked up something new when we were in an ice storm, right? Take a minute and think about a hobby that you picked up in the last few years. And once you think about that in your mind, think about how that felt and how that feels to be like, oh, I learned this new thing, and how that contrasts to coming to your mandatory PD staff meeting after school on a topic that doesn't apply to you. those two things feel very different. How were those experiences different from you for the thing that you really wanted to learn, that's new thing that you picked up? How did you act different? How did you feel different versus the mandatory PD that you had to attend? What are your thoughts? You can drop them in the chat or you can just unmute and talk.
I think you feel like you're more invested in it because it's something you're passionate about. And students also would be more invested, like with the candy one, the chopstick one, because it's like stuff they buy anyway, and they think it's cool to learn how to make it, and it's fun, relevant.
Any thoughts about how it makes you feel to come to the mandatory PD after school that it doesn't apply to you?
Yeah.
So I was in a meeting at my old school, and we were talking about, I don't know, irritating people that we work with. Just people that just rub you the wrong way. And I was kind of irritated because I was in a meeting. I'm like, whatever. I have grades. I have things to do. Whatever. And so I am listening, half listening to this presentation, and lo and behold, it applied to me. So when I'm in a PD, then I'm like, oh, this doesn't really, I don't really need to be here. I need to sit and really sit on that and think about, yeah, I probably do need to be here, and I need to maybe really look closely, because that person that was my irritant at my old job, what it came down to was there are students in your school that have a relationship with that person, because that person's needed. I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to shut up now. You know what I mean? I was like, I took it too personally, and I was thinking about me. And so when I'm in, like I said, when I'm in a PD and I'm like, oh geez, I could be doing something else, I got to think about, it's bigger than me. We're here for the whole kiddo, and not just a sliver that piques my interest. I don't know.
There were so many good nuggets in what you just said, like coming to a BD where you're sure it's not about you and it really is relevant. I love that, because that's so happened so many times. And the person who irritates you, but really they still have something valuable to add. Oh, for sure. Those were some good things.
No, I'm thinking usually if something happened like this, so if I'm here and this topic doesn't really relate to me, maybe I still can learn something and use it in the future. And just try to participate. And
Exactly. To me, it seems like the difference between these two examples is all about personal choice. And we're more likely to be invested in something that we have some sort of a choice or say in. Although the very mindful folks that are here are like, well, if it doesn't feel like it has anything to do with you, give it a second. You might see the connection shortly, right? So I love that as well.
So these all kind of go back to also as well to the two different kinds of motivation. There's intrinsic motivation, which is like personal choice. I chose to do this. I'm doing this myself. I'm picking up this hobby because I want to. And that versus an extrinsic motivation, which is it comes from outside. Somebody is paying me to do this. I'm getting a grade. I'm getting a reward for it. I'm doing that. And when you're dealing with intrinsic motivation, like picking up that personal hobby, then you're open to learning, you put in extra time, you try to perfect your style and your skill. And often when you're doing extrinsic motivation, the research says that you just do whatever it takes to get the reward as soon as possible, or to get the punishment to be over. And you're not looking for how good can you make it, but just what's the bare minimum that I need to do. The intrinsic motivation, when you have the choice to do it, when you're motivated by something you like, you own it, it's yours. Versus extrinsic motivation is, what do I need to show in order to get this done? How do I make this other person happy? Not how do you make yourself happy? And because you own it with intrinsic motivation, you often wind up with a greater degree of learning, deeper learning, versus the extrinsic motivation. If you're just motivated by the grades or by the getting money or whatever it is, then you just complete the task in any way possible. And that sometimes includes things that we don't like cheating or guessing or all of that stuff. So we look at how do we nurture that intrinsic motivation? How do we get students to take ownership of it? And one piece of it is, the biggest and most effective one is, I feel like I can do it. So if a person feels like they can do it, they're more likely to invest in it. And a lot of our students who are not motivated to be there, there's a deep-seated feeling in a lot of them that they can't do it, that they don't know how to do it, that they have learned somewhere along the way that they're not good students. They're not good students, right? So that's that first piece of how to do it. And just like the example I was talking about at the beginning, as soon as they saw, I can do one piece of it, well, I want to try another piece. Maybe I can do a second piece, because competence feeds competence. And the more you feel like you can do a little piece of it, the more you want to take on. Now, these other pieces are also important. Autonomy, having some control over what happens. Christy brought that up when we were talking about the difference between the hobby versus the PD, having some choice about and control over what happens. Relatedness, we talked about that too. Doing it for people who care about you, and relevance, doing it because it relates to where I want to go in my life. And all of those are important, but the biggest one is, can I do it? Even if it's relevant to me and I don't feel like I can do it, I'm not gonna, many people won't start. So we think about some of the things we've talked about with equitable grading in order to improve intrinsic motivation. So one of them is, we were talking about making clear goals. So like those rubrics we're talking about, or, listing your specific skills, that lets people feel like, hey, I know I can do this piece of it, or I can start doing this piece of it. I know how to get there, and I can figure out how it relates to my life. The second piece is teaching students how to self-assess. This helps them with their own autonomy and choice and view of where they're going. If they can figure out, am I doing well by themselves, then it lets them know what they need to learn, what they don't need to learn, what they need to focus on. This goes back to that personal hobby. You're self-assessing, am I good enough? Am I doing good enough constantly? When students can do that themselves, it lets them spend the effort where it needs to go. Another one is giving specific supported feedback. This is about that relationship piece between you and that student. It makes you feel like not only telling them where they're doing right and getting better, but lets them feel like you've got their back. How are you helping them succeed in the piece that they want to succeed in? You're telling them, well, what you need is this. You're doing really well. You've got these good pieces. You're helping them feel competent on the parts that they can do. And this is how you get to the next stage. And the research shows that if you give back homework and you have a letter grade on there, they won't read the feedback at all. So you kind of have to just provide feedback and let the grades sort of take care of themselves. Some other things that help with the motivation, provide time and support to practice. So classroom time in the room where you could be there to provide one-on-one feedback, where they can work through things and get help on the parts that they're confused about. That helps them choose where they need the help and what kind of instruction they need, and lets them see what parts they already have, what parts they have mastered, so they can feel that competence. Cooperative assessment against goals, that goes back to that relationship piece. That means you're working with a student in order to figure out what the assessment should be. So you can have a conference about, this goes back to some of that ungrading piece, where you have conference about what does the assessment mean, or you work together about having students self-assess and then you self-assess and you have a conversation about what that means, so that they have an idea where they feel like they fall and you have an idea where you feel like they fall, and together you end up in a situation where you agree on what that means. And that makes you feel like teaming together as opposed and on the same side, as opposed to working against each other. And the last piece of it is, and this is around sort of more of the relatedness, is doing empathy interviews and changing your class based on feedback you get from students, because it makes them feel like they have some autonomy and choice and control over the class, because they're telling you, well, it helps me when you do this and it doesn't help me when you do this. I enjoy learning when you play games in class, or when we're making some food or something that I use. I don't enjoy it when I don't understand what's happening. When I did this in my class, I would talk about, like, tell me about a class you like. And they would list a bunch of things like, well, what is it about that class that you liked? And they would say, well, I understood what I was doing. I knew what was expected of me. And then we worked on, well, how do we make this class clearer for what you need, and make it sure that you understand what's expected of you. So those are some techniques that people say will help with that intrinsic motivation. Any thoughts about that before I go on? Okay. So now we kind of get into that problem of practice around how do we deal with a problem of practice around student motivation. And we have a really small group today. And I was expecting some of those slides to take a little longer because we'd have more discussion around them. But how do you want to do this, Christy? We've only got 4 folks here. How do we want to do our problem of practice?
I would enjoy just having a small group, just us, and doing a problem of practice just in a small group, unless people feel strongly about breaking up into even smaller groups and doing like a breakout room where you're maybe sharing with one other person. What do you guys think?
I think the whole group is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What does
I
other
think
people think?
I agree.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right.
Okay.
I'll go to the next slide about our protocol, and then maybe I'll stop sharing and you can kind of, how do you feel about leading us through that, Christy?
I feel great about it. Well, first of all, we're looking for someone to present. So they're giving just like we do every time when we have a problem of practice, nothing new here. We're just looking for someone to be willing to share. So be thinking about that if that could be you. But then we go through our phase of asking clarifying questions, and then asking probing questions. The group's discussing for a while, and then the presenter comes back on and sort of summarizes what they heard, and then we kind of bring it to a close. So I really enjoy, I've told you guys this before, I really have enjoyed this protocol when I was in another PLC. And I just learned a lot from not only the process, but just from listening to other people talk about the challenges that they face in their classroom. I always feel like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like I'm not the only person that experiences that. That's very relieving to me in a lot of ways. So if if you're feeling a little anxious about being the sharer, I would say we all benefit from hearing about your challenges, because I can almost guarantee that if other people don't have the exact same challenge, they have one real similar. So any volunteers for being a presenter?
Before we get into that, normally when we put people in breakout rooms, we don't record the problem of practice. So should I pause the recording while we go through this? Or what are your thoughts? What are people's thoughts? Leave the recording on or take it or pause?
Anyone have strong feelings one way or the other? Like, absolutely not. Or yes, please. Maybe Andrea, let's figure out who the presenter is, and then we can ask the presenter specifically how they feel about
Sounds
that.
good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Any presenter volunteers? You're going to be sharing a challenge that you have with student motivation.
I'll chime in. So I don't know. Students just, I care more than they do. It appears
Okay,
that.
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you really quick. So
sorry.
Nancy, you're volunteering to be presenter. I love that. Thank you so much. Do you mind if we still video this part where you're sharing your challenge?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so take a couple minutes and share your challenge.
Well, I teach freshman physics, and I have some students who are just not, their attendance is great. You know, when I tell them there's 3 things you got to do: come to class, do the work, and turn it in. Their attendance is like 100%. And that's it. They're not showing any effort. Their heads are down on their desks more than they're, up. I'm just kind of bewildered because it takes a lot to get to school, right? They got a lot of, they have to make all the right choices. And then when they get here, they just lose it. So I'm kind of bewildered because in the morning, I know kids can be a little sleepy and it's hard to get them together, like their brains functioning. But it's impacting their grade to the point where they're going to have to retake my class or retake another, take an additional science class to make up for this F. And I mean, I'm just blown away. Like if you're going to make it here, man, you put a little bit more effort and you could walk away with like a C probably, and, some knowledge. And so I'm kind of frustrated, with that. And I feel being energetic and loving your subject that you teach. And I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough to get the kids motivated. Yeah. Is that what you want?
Yep. Thank you. That's perfect. Okay. Clarifying questions, team. Clarifying questions. I know I have a couple I wrote down, but I'm not going to go first. Someone go first.
Could you talk a little bit about if these are freshmen or sophomores, or where they're at?
They're freshmen. They're freshmen. So I'm trying to give them like the big picture. If you don't pass my class, you're going to have to take a class your sophomore, junior, or senior year. And that's kind of risky to fail a class your freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I was just going to ask if these students passed science before, like in middle school, did they pass or were they just passed on?
That's a really valid question. I don't know. I talked to a math teacher today, and just about like students, like, well, this kiddo doesn't do anything in my class. He's like, yeah, he doesn't do anything in my class either. I'm like, okay. So I just don't know. And it pains me because in school, I wasn't like the best student at all. And, so I'm like, your future's not, it's not hinged on what a teacher says to you. You know what I mean? you can still have, you can turn over a brand new leaf. When you get a new teacher, you move to a new school, you definitely can take back what someone took from you. And I just like, I just don't know if that's the experience of these kids. And I don't know if I have access to their middle school grades, because, yeah, we get them, they're freshmen and they're newbies. We don't know anything about them. And if you're a junior teacher and you want to know about how a kid did in freshman year, they have, their freshman and sophomore year teachers to talk to. I don't have anybody. So I kind of feel that's a good question. Yeah.
What's the, I'm just trying to get a vision of your school. Are you urban or suburban or rural?
It's Springfield, Oregon,
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I would call that like suburban. Would you call that suburban?
I don't know. It's like right smack in the middle of like residential area.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
land, the outskirts. So how
Yeah.
we want to, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a mix of some rural and
Yeah.
some
Mhm.
suburban. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what the breakdown in your classroom is of maybe like language learners and
Do.
students on IEP?
Sure, not off the top of my hand, or
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't, the kiddo that I'm thinking about does not have an IEP, does not have a 504, does not require any supports.
Mhm.
So some of it, I think, like this particular student, he would act out a little bit at the beginning of the school year, and that's kind of like, since I'm not reacting to it, he's kind of but he does things to get reactions. So
Oh, yeah.
it's just like, oh, I just wish you would just concentrate. Oh, take this energy of distraction and really put it into getting an assignment done.
Yeah.
I mean, they're capable, but just bare minimum. I overheard a kiddo today go, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to worry about passing that class because I can pass that class in night school." I'm like,
Oh.
whoa, all right,
All
okay,
right.
if that's how you want to roll. But the motivation, see, that to me worrisome.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What does the beginning of your class look like every day? Is it different every day, or are we kind of starting
We start
with
the
same, like with the same activity or the same
format?
And what is that?
Yeah, so they walk in, I greet them. Lately it's been like, how are you guys doing? With the whole, well, we had ice storms here. I don't know where you guys are all from, but we had devastating ice storms that we were out of school all last week. And their first day back was Tuesday. So there's a lot of that going on. And then, I start right in. I start my class on time. We starting with such a question. We get rolling with it immediately. So, and then I try and be spontaneous. I try to involve the kids in my lecture, my short lectures. And so, I try and involve them so they feel a little bit more like they're part of it, other than me just speaking at them. I don't do a whole lot of talking because physics, the NGSS physics is really hands-on. Then we're jumping right into our lab and we're writing, or we're doing a lab or things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much how the beginning of my day starts at every period.
When they're doing the hands-on portions, are they involved, or are they like passive?
Passively involved, walking across the room to throw away a paper when the garbage can's like right near their desk. You know what I mean? Walking across the room to visit with a friend who's not in their lab group. So it's very a lot. It's just a lot of effort to do nothing. Yeah. And if I can just use the restroom and be gone for 20 minutes, that's 20 minutes I don't have to be in the class. And we've cut that out. Yeah. But, you know, it's just like, it just kills me because they're going to be hopefully, you know, a little panicked junior, senior year. Like, oh my gosh, I got to make up these classes that I'm failing if I'm going to graduate from high school.
Okay, how about probing questions, team? What are some probing questions that we have for Nancy?
At my school, they do sort of freshman success, and I don't know if it's across the board where you're like looking at being on track for graduation. Do you guys do any work about on track for graduation to kind of think about how many things you need, how many classes they need to pass so they understand the ramifications before junior year?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we do a class called ninth grade. It's called CCR 9. And it's a class that it should be used to work on other work and also do those little things. Every student has a Naviance account, which they're inside their account. There are tasks specifically for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And these questions and these activities get them thinking about, you know, their academic success, or, you know, and also outside, like what do they want to do when they grow up, you know, those kind of things. Yeah, no, we don't wait until junior year to grab their attention, like, hey, this is going to be something you know, not fun for you, doing night school and summer school just to walk with your class. No, we get them before, definitely. We have interventions, you know, one basic one that we're doing right now this Friday is cookies and cram, where we encourage students, and I was making phone calls home before I left for work today, to encourage students to come and participate. And they can go from classroom to classroom and meet with those teachers to help them with an assignment that needs to be turned in by the finals schedule. Yeah, we have all of those interventions, but, you know, I just don't know. I feel there's only so much that we can do, and I have to look at the parents and go, what is your part in this? You know, are you okay with your student failing my class? Are you encouraging him or her to participate? Are you talking about what you did in class today? You know?
Do you think that it's like a handful of students, or do you think that this is like a majority of your class? Because I think that might help understand like maybe the
it's
action you might.
a few of my students, you know, when I think of my 160 kids that I teach, it might be something like 10 students, it might be 10 that just have this attitude of they're just lackadaisical, you know, they have the attendance, they show up, but they're there really just to fraternize with their peers.
And that's out of one class or all of your classes?
All of my classes. Yeah.
Okay. That seems pretty manageable. Like,
yeah.
Although they can take the class off in a different direction if they have really strong personalities, but
sure. But not
what
this year.
What I'm wondering is do you have any colleagues that have those students in their classes as well that are being successful with those students?
Right. So I just talked to one math teacher today after school, and when I was giving her some tests because she has one of my students as a math help class, and so she's like, oh man, he's in here and he needs it. I see he needs some testing done, and I'm like, here's some papers. So I was like, you know, how's this kiddo in your class? And she's like, doesn't do much. I'm like, okay, because I want to know, is it me? is it the time of class? Is it the subject? Is it just, you know, because it's the morning, you wake up after third period, like what is going on? So that's just one teacher that I spoke with. And then we do this, we meet once a week and we talk about students that are like in that middle section of the triangle, that we could really with a little bit of help, we could really boost them up to get better grades. And some of those kids, you know, we talk about, so I know, and to land in that group of kids that we talk about on Wednesdays, you have to be failing more than one class. So I see these names come up again and again. They're not just failing my class, they're failing other classes as well.
They're
But then
like students of concern.
Why? Yeah, I don't know why. If it's like, is it who you're sitting with? You know, whatever the subject. You know, like school. You know, I just like to get to the bottom of this, and so we meet. I love it because we meet. We just concentrate on this kid for 15 minutes, and we give, you know, the goods, the bads, and the uglies. Like, what makes this kid tick? What gets him motivated? You know, have you had any success? And
Is the counselor involved in those meetings?
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They're the ones that lead it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, I would say, you know, it's not you because that's 10 out of 160 students. And at my school, I feel like sometimes ninth graders do that. And then in 10th grade, they kind of do it. And then their friends are a few years older and graduate. And then they buckle down and start working hard. But I know at that time it's late when you're missing credits.
It just makes me nervous because you know, I just want them to, I want them to move on and have a success. And maybe they weren't successful in middle school, but you know, they should know that they can turn over a new leaf and do a new them, right? And I don't know.
I'm thinking about conversation, like individual conversations with the students to try to understand maybe some of their larger goals beyond school, or
Yeah.
wondering if trying to tap into what is it that they're interested in to kind of give you a better picture of maybe how to connect what you want to teach them to maybe something that they're already motivated to learn about.
Oh,
or
yeah.
at least having those conversations that lets them know that you care about them as a person.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you don't, but sometimes they like are like, wow, this person took the time to know me, so I'm gonna show up for them a little bit more.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, we just got the science teachers. We just did a tour of one of our local wineries. One of the a husband of a teacher, and you know, I'm talking to the vintners. I'm like, "How'd you get here?" Like, "Oh, I have a chemistry degree." And I'm like, "You don't go to OSU and do the fermentation thing?" He's like, "No." I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I need to tell my kids." You know, it's like, if you like chemistry, I don't teach it, but I'm always wanting to bring out you know, occupations that don't really are not like, they're not your normal, you know, nurse, teacher, fireman, cop, right? All that kind of thing. And I want to just let them know that there's jobs out there that are really cool jobs, but you got to jump through these hoops first, and you can have, you know, an amazing, interesting life. And so I want to encourage them, but I know the carrot is on a really long stick, and it's hard to see the end when you're in the mire, you know?
And I know that when I've had students that acted similarly the way that you're talking, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily the same exact students, but when I've had students who show up but don't do anything, a portion of them haven't felt successful in so long in school at anything that they don't feel like they can succeed, and they're acting out because they don't feel like they can be successful, so that their school time is like, well, here's where I get to feel bad about myself again.
Yeah,
And
because
so I wonder if there's a way to think about how can you make little successes in your class so they can like chip away at little things and feel a little taste of success, which will then feed to, well, I could do that. Maybe I can try something a little bigger. I did that.
yeah,
Maybe I can try, because they're so used to feeling
yep,
unsuccessful and being unsuccessful and internalizing that to I'm now stupid, right? That's a lot of kids internalize those failures as a
yep.
personal failing on their own part,
Mhm.
rather than like I if rather than I just haven't, they need to do a little bit of work. It's a character trait instead of a consequence of the amount of work that they've done. So I
Yeah,
wonder if you can figure out ways to make little tiny successes and maybe have that conversation around when was the last time you felt successful in school, and what were you doing, and what was that class like, to see if
Mhm.
there's something else you can do in your class to support them that you haven't thought of.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. You know, because when you look at a kid who has not been successful in school, you know, it's that being a failure or failing at something, not being a failure, but failing at something is, and I feel that it's almost like that's their comfort zone. They're very comfortable there, and so to do anything above that, you know, that's a new experience, and that can be kind of scary because now if they're successful at that, they know they can do the job, you know, and so it's like if I'm going to be successful, do I have to keep being successful? Like my effort, I'm going to have to put forth the effort. And, you know, that can be kind of scary because that's now a commitment that they've made to themselves. Do you
And
follow?
also on top of that, there's that whole thing of, well, if I choose to not do any work, then it's my choice that I failed. It's not just another time to reaffirm that I'm stupid.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that is so true. Yeah. But then that's the shield that they hide behind because if I don't try, I won't fail. Right. You know, but they are failing because they're not, you know, putting out the work.
One of the things I remember so clearly from my high school physics class is the teacher often did some kind of a discrepant event around the topic that we were studying, and we always started with that. And it was always it was very engaging. Like, that is not what I thought was going to happen. That's weird. And it just got us all kind of activated and excited and engaged. And then we would be off touching something, trying it out ourselves, like trying to figure out what was going on. And I just remember that I think about that often in just how clever my physics teacher was with kind of activating us and our thinking and our wondering about things, and then getting into like, well, let's try it out. You know, let's get up and like move some stuff and put this here and do this and see what happens. And just like you said, physics is so hands-on, right? But having it, it's almost like coming at the topic from the other way. Like, instead of learning about it and then we go do the lab and sort of confirm what we saw, it's more of that inquiry approach of like, see the thing, see that discrepant event, scratch our heads about it a little bit, wonder about it, go try some stuff, and then maybe like focus in our direction. It's like starting with the driving question board. We see something, we wonder about it, we ask questions, and then we kind of focus in on figuring out why. Why is it happening? Um, as a high school student, I just found that super compelling reason to learn about it. And I'm not a physics lover, right, myself. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think about it a lot.
Thank you for those bits of advice. I appreciate it.
So, you know, I am teaching physics also, and so you know, and the whole our I think department struggling with physics students. I think it's because of age, freshmen. I'm teaching juniors, biology juniors. It's very different kind of students. Yeah, and also I think physics as a class is more difficult, and to understand. And for physics, students need to have a background, math background, to be prepared, like a prerequisites, like a prerequisites, math, strong with math. So why it's kind of understandable why it's happening. Just my portion of so I'm struggling too. I want to say with physics students. I think it's an age, might be age. They're not mature enough, and for as a subject in this age, and probably it's a difficult subject to understand. Yeah. Why it's like this? Yeah, and I think group, if working with group, if like make them work as a teams, maybe make them more kind of successful, and they can talk with each other, ask each other. Maybe some of them more kind of strong in physics and math, and help another kids to understand and stuff like this. I'm trying this stuff.
I know I found that to be true in my classroom. The more the students have the opportunity to talk to each other and interact about it, the more engagement I got from them, for sure. So I definitely identified with what you said, Elena. Okay, Nancy, do you want to kind of summarize what you heard while we listen?
Oh boy, I should have been taking notes. Okay. Make the class a little bit more interactive at the beginning to get the kids kind of getting them engaged in the content, and just having them, and this is a struggle because I have these kids are, I have first and second period and they don't talk, like they're asleep. You know what I mean? Like I haven't talked about, I'm thinking, oh, that'd be kind of a fun subject. And then it's like crickets. So getting them kind of activated that way it'll be a challenge. Oh my gosh, what else was said? There was more things. I apologize. Let me think.
Maybe phone a friend. Maybe there's some people who can chime in.
Yeah, please.
I know I talked about trying to find some ways that you can organize your class to give them little tiny successes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe start with that engaging piece and then give them little tiny successes.
Yeah. Okay.
To get a taste for success.
Cool.
I heard group work, just the ability to talk things over with each other, or share ideas, or wonder aloud with each other in a sort of a low stakes way. Like I know Bailey said this before we started our problem of practice, but having some way to share your thoughts and ideas in a low stakes setting. So there are no wrong answers here. We're just sharing what we think. Bailey talked about like writing it down and then passing a paper and then you're reading it aloud. Such a great way to get people's voices out there without attaching them to the voice.
That might work both in your quiet class and in your class where you have the students.
Yeah, I like that one as well. And I've done this before, where people write down the answer on a piece of paper and then you throw it in the middle of the room and everyone grabs a piece of paper. It's probably not theirs. And then they, read what's on the paper, right? But they have no ownership of it, which is kind of nice. So I'll have to, that one's been on the shelf for too long. I'll have to dust that one off and try it.
Yeah, and it's active, so I think they would like it too.
Yeah, thank
I'd
you.
like to read someone else's answer. It takes the pressure off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your advice. I'm writing this stuff down. I'm gonna execute it tomorrow. Try some things out. They're not gonna know, but I will.
I also heard, I think this is a really important point, and I feel like Kimberly said this. I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but the percentage of kids that are very low engagement is pretty small in all, considering your total number of kids. And so keeping perspective on it, I think, is really important also. You're doing your best to reach everyone, and not every strategy works for every kid, right? So you're just in a fact-finding mission right now to find those things that do resonate with those kids. So just like a little bit of this should be going on right now for you, patting yourself on the back, like you have less than 10% of your kids who are drastically not engaged. That's pretty good, you know? So just acknowledge that, I think, to yourself as well.
Yeah, it is kind of, a little frustrating. But it is what it is, and tomorrow I'm going to put out emails asking, like, what is this kiddo like in your classroom? And if it's different than mine, what are you doing different than me? Yeah, so I'll have a busy next week and this week.
And don't forget to ask the students too about like their previous history, because they might
Yes.
have some things that your teachers haven't thought of too. I know that when I asked, I invited them to lunch and we had lunch and I bought them pizza, right? And then I was like, well, tell me about some classes you've enjoyed. And they came up with some ideas that weren't being used in my building. So that might be another source of
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Go to the source, right? Just go right to the source. I like that. Thank you.
All right. Well, Nancy, thank you again for being the person willing to take a risk and to share your challenge. Again, I think we all benefit when that happens. So I appreciate you putting yourself out there. Andrea, what do we have on the slides next after problem of practice?
Let me go back to the slides. So
One thing
after
I
our
was gonna
problem of
say,
practice,
like, oh,
hang
Andrea,
we were
on.
gonna, oh, sorry,
is
go
there
ahead.
any chance, if Nancy wants to, she could like update us in a month or something if anything worked?
That's actually kind of leading into what we want everyone to do. So
Oh.
that's a great thing to say, because once we get past our problem of practice and we talk about motivation, I'll come back to this. What we want to try to do for next time is to have folks try to commit to trying something for next session and bring them back to talk about, I tried this is what I've tried, and use that for your problem of practice next time. Like, I've tried this and this is what happened when I did it. Are we still thinking that's a good idea, Christy? So I definitely want to hear what happens for Nancy. And if anybody else is trying anything, I want to hear those too.
I will report back. Count on it.
But also just in general, like everyone, try something. Because I
Yeah.
know that motivation is a hot button item right now. Teachers all across the US are struggling to some degree with motivation, right? And that's like a function of post-pandemic and a function of just so many things, right? The state of the world. And so it's definitely on, I think, everyone's radar to some degree. So I'm sure some part of what you heard from Nancy or other things that people shared resonate with you in some way. So when we say commit to trying something for next session, think about what challenges you about motivation and what is even like a little thing that you could try. Try it out this next month. And when we reconvene at the end of February, we'd love to hear about it. And presumably there will be more of us because it won't be a finals week. But there'll be more of us, and yeah, would love to hear just how did it go this past month? How did you try to work on whatever the motivation issue is in your classroom? It could be even your own personal motivation, right? It doesn't even have to be necessarily about the kids, because I've certainly had periods in my career where going to work each day was like I had to have a self-talk in the morning, like, yep, we can do this, know how to do this. We've been doing this for a long time. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't even have to be just your kids' motivation. It could be you. And then bring it to talk about next time.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want some additional resources in the slides, we've got these books. So the Student Motivation Handbook, which is 50 ways to boost intrinsic motivation. You can look at that book. Nudge, which is talking about different strategies you can do to kind of get you over the little bump to actually doing the work. And then there was this podcast we heard about the Great Resignation for Teens, which is all about teens went through COVID and then said, why am I going to school anyway? Why am I doing all of this? And how do we get them back from the experience of maybe not feeling motivated? And then we have some articles. We definitely want you to try something different for your problem of practice, but if you want to try to read these optional reading for next time, go ahead and feel free to do so. That might give you some more ideas of something to try. And then Christy, do you have the attendance survey you can drop in the chat? And then maybe
I
the link for the
did.
exit ticket.
Yeah,
Oh, you
I
did that
did drop
already?
it in the
Okay.
chat. I'm going to do it again. The
Okay.
attendance form is right here. Here. I see that says semester 1, but that's the only one I found. So let's just fill that one out. And then the exit ticket, which again, we read every single bit of that exit ticket. So we really appreciate when you take the time, take a few minutes to do that. The exit ticket is here.
And then I think that maybe what we'll do for next session is just see if we can talk to David Strayer and the Wild Apricot folks to send an email out saying, hey, it looks like a bunch of people got too busy to attend the first motivation session. We'd like you to try something in your classroom to try as a problem of practice. And here's the link to the recordings in case people wanted to see what the recording was.
That's a good idea. Yes.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording because it says to do that right now on my slide.